let's jump in. And as we roll into this, one of the things, it's a great way to start out this presentation is by talking about how the FairTax is both or all simple and fair and transparent. And we'll outline that for you as we move through the presentation. And you take a look at this first slide here, and let me press my play button so you can actually see that. It's really remarkable. I've done this presentation hundreds of times, and I look at this slide and it never ceases to hit me like a ton of bricks in the side of the head. We have a tax code that is so complex that no two CPAs could get it right the first time, the same time. It just wouldn't work. Like there's not an individual who has such savviness that they could actually understand this thing. It is broken, and we know it. And we know it's not actually something new unless you've really been in a cave for the last part of your adult life. And the point is, it's been talked about, especially in this recent election cycle, and it's a part of the reason why our special topic is that we've got some urgency here to really get the word out about this. So we've got a piece of legislation called our current tax code that really does not incentivize the behavior that we're looking for. And if you think about that, what we mean is that the more money you make, the more the government takes. And that is a very slippery slope, because once you hit a certain threshold, yeah, people are going to actually, instead of keeping to grow, they're going to start to be really conservative with what they're doing with their business and their money. And we want to have a tax code that incentivizes the right behavior, growth, namely growth, and that it's just really super simple. And so we're going to introduce you to the FairTax tonight that is super simple. So with that, there's 7 elements of our current tax code that really create drag on a progressive tax system. So we're going to go ahead and outline those for you right now. So number 1, convoluted, like I just illustrated through that incredible diagram. Punishes growth and expansion, inspires the wrong behavior. I alluded to that already. Lack of transparency, and there's a lot of loopholes. Yeah, well, we'll get to it. Really inefficient, impedes privacy. There's winners and losers. You think about this for a second. If you have enough money and you've got the right connections and you went to the right schools where you got educated around some things that could enlighten you around the tax system, and you put all those factors together, you can skirt the system more than somebody else. And that just doesn't work. I mean, that works against us, right? It creates class, it fuels the class warfare fire, and that doesn't really serve our country. Extremely time-intensive and laborious, and I'll say a little bit more about that later on in the presentation. Especially as a self-employed business owner, I can really speak to this. So the Fair Tax Plan is legislation that exists right now, and it's not actually new. Larry, you may know the year this was introduced. Was it the early 90s?
No, it was 1999.
99. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so and before this, so we've got a piece of legislation that exists right now that is unnew for Congress, unless someone's new to Congress. But the point is, it's got traction from the standpoint of awareness and from co-sponsorship. And before we dig into the nuances of it, it would be good for everyone on the line to know that this legislation has behind it the greatest capitalization of any piece of tax reform in the history of this country. $22 million of private money that commissioned many of the country's most brilliant PhD economists and tax researchers went into creating this. Now just pause for a second. Like, no other piece of tax legislation can hold a candle to the research that has gone into what you're about to hear tonight. Like, that should carry some weight with you. So, you know, this isn't something where some people who were kind of fed up with the tax system threw some numbers together and thought, oh, well, this will work better. No. This is like nearly a decade of research and 90 PhD economists and researchers like did the work on this thing. So yeah, I think I've made a bit of a point here, and it's really important that you know that, because you know, you hear about things like the flat tax and you know what the current administration may propose, and it's like yeah, it's hasn't been researched like this has been. So with that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to move through those 7 elements that create drag on our economy by our current tax system, and we're going to show you how the fair tax undoes them and releases the drag and, you know, really greases the economy, and through fairness, through simplicity, and through transparency, and through, you know, overall just a really a brilliantly devised piece of legislation. So to start with, you know, think about over 75,000 pages. The number that was on the screen earlier was actually a bit outdated. And the current tax code is the fair tax is 131 pages double spaced. You could actually, and you could read it. Like, you could read it, and you know, there's a bit of legalese in it, but it would, like, you could comprehend what it's saying. So, you know, sometimes simple is just better. And when you overcomplicate something, going to extreme simplicity is, you know, an element of the winning formula here. So we talk about, or I shared earlier, that the fair tax, an income tax-based system punishes growth. Like, you know, you're going to understand that. That just makes sense. The fair tax supports growth. So let's get into what it is. It's a consumption tax, not an income tax, and it eliminates all federal taxes and repeals the 16th Amendment, which is what gives Congress the power to tax income. So we eliminate, I'm going to list a whole bunch of these, and I'm probably not going to get them all, but you got personal and corporate income taxes go away, capital gains goes away, alternative minimum, death tax, estate tax, the payroll tax, all of these taxes, they go away. And the way, and by the way, the fair tax is a revenue neutral platform, meaning in its first year of implementation, it will collect the same amount of revenue for the government that our current tax system will. And as the economy grows, it'll collect more. So you've got a consumption-based tax system. Like, it taxes on spending. And it's fully transparent. Like, there's no loopholes. So check this out. There's only one tax, just one, on new retail goods and services to the tune of 23%. So let's play this out in an example. At the retail level, let's say that you go to the mall to buy some clothing and you happen into the Gap and you find yourself fancying a pair of jeans that you really enjoy. Now, I actually had to go to the mall recently, and it wasn't a pleasant experience, but that's really neither the time or the place of it. I was astonished at the price of jeans. So, you know, $100 for a pair of designer jeans is actually a pretty good bargain. So anyway, you go in and you check out. Well, the fair tax is what the way it's legislated. It's revenue it's revenue neutral. Sorry, I already said that. It's revenue inclusive. It's tax inclusive to the price of what you see on the price tag. So let's say, for simplicity purposes, the price tag on the jeans said $100. What will happen is you'll go check out and you'll pay $100. So in other words, when you get your receipt, it'll say that the cost of the jeans was $77 and the amount of fair tax or national retail sales tax was $23 in this case. It's 23%, right? Now let me make a comment here, because there's people who dispute this 23% and they say, well, it's actually 30%. And this is a matter of semantical math. So let me illustrate something for you. In this example, if you divide 77 into the $23, you get 30%. If you divide 100 into the 23, you get 23%. So it's just a matter of inclusive versus exclusive. And because the fair tax is inclusive in all retail goods, like in other words, you get to the cash register and you don't pay tax on top of the number that's on the price tag, it's inclusive. What that means is you have 23%. You do 23 over 100, not 23 over 77. And there's a bit of risk when I go into math on this, because I don't have it up on the screen and you might be wondering a bit what I'm talking about. But the point is, if you hear about this legislation, you may hear some people saying, oh, no, it's not actually 23%, it's 30%. Well, I just talked you through why there's that discrepancy, and it's not really a discrepancy. It's just a matter of how one might look at it from a math standpoint. Yeah, I think I've said enough on it. If you have a question, write it in and we can talk more about it. One tax, sales tax on consumption, retail goods and services, and new, used goods are unaffected. So I'm gonna slow down for a moment, and I'm going to share another example here so you can understand how this would work. So let's say you've got a business who's a home builder, and when that home builder buys all the raw materials they need, including the land, to build a home, they will not end up paying taxes on that, because the fair tax is only levied at the retail level. So business-to-business transactions, the fair tax is not incurred. Now that home builder goes and builds a house and they sell it as a brand new home. It's a new good. And the first consumer who comes along that buys that, they will be paying the fair tax on it, right? So they pay for it, and then the home builder is responsible for setting aside 23% of it, and just like every other business, they will remit the fair tax to their state sales tax bureau every month. Now when that consumer lives in that home for 7 years, which is the average until somebody moves, the next person who comes along to buy it, no fair tax is levied, and that is the case for every time that home is resold into perpetuity. So one tax, sales tax, federal level only, does not impact the states. New goods and services, retail level only. All right. So let's look at the benefits for business and trade. So we estimate, I shouldn't say we, I would say through research, it's estimated that there's $120 trillion globally, not just from U.S. citizens, but globally, in personal and corporate assets that are parked offshore. And that money is purposely shielded in tax shelters or in banking shelters so that the U.S. government can't get their hands on it. And right now in our current tax system, wealthy individuals and business owners who bring it back in and then take it for income or put it to use, they're subject to some repatriation risk and some capital gains risk and some income risk. So they keep it there. Well, when the fair tax gets levied and personal and corporate and capital gains taxes, when that goes away, you know, that money starts to flow back in and it can be put to use. And business owners are going to do, what they know best, which is they're going to reinvest in their businesses. Next, the U.S. becomes a corporate headquarter haven. Big deal right now, called inversion. U.S. companies are relocating corporate headquarters to tax-friendly countries like Ireland to save millions of dollars in corporate income taxes. And of course, Trump has made quite a deal of this, and you know, he's threatening the heck out of it. But at the end of the day, the fair tax would have no corporate income tax structure, which means businesses would flock here to locate their corporate headquarters. Corporate real estate would be a boon, and there'd be an immense amount of construction and all kinds of jobs and a lot of spending injected into our economy. And once that infrastructures are built, there'd be a whole bunch of jobs because of staffing, and it'd be like this massive, massive injection of cash into our economy. And then we've got the underground economy right now, estimated $2 trillion. You know, anytime any illegal or any person who's skirting the tax system right now, anytime they go and buy something, they pay their fair share. So you've got quite a system here that broadens the base. Like every single person in the entire country pays at whatever level they pay, and it's fair because you only pay a little if you can't afford to spend a lot. And if you make a bunch of money and you spend a lot, you pay a lot more. Yeah, it's just really progressive that way. Makes sense. So super efficient, very simple to collect. We already have a state sales tax in 45 states. We'll leverage that infrastructure. We get 80% more efficient right away by collecting from approximately 18 to 20 million businesses rather than 120 million households. There's only one form to fill out which says, what were your gross receipts, your gross revenue? Multiply that by 23%, and that's what you submit to the State Sales Tax Bureau, who then turns it on to the Department of the Treasury. And the state bureaus are incentivized by 0.25% of all of their collection to, you know, police this whole thing and have a really, you know, a really slick system. Like, so that 0.25% would go into all the businesses in each state upgrading their point-of-sale retail checkout software, right? So you know, they're gonna get some support there. So look, it's just really smart. You know, it's super efficient, simple to collect, and if you think about the IRS right now, it's just super inefficient. You know, it costs $13 billion to run. They only collect 75% of what they should. The fair tax would defund the IRS and eliminate it over a 3-year period. Yeah, that sounds good to me. You had me at hello. All right, privacy protected. You pay your taxes when you make purchases, no filling out detailed income tax forms. And look, this is fair, and it's fair in large part because of what I said, of the way it's created, where you're going to pay your fair share based on what you're spending. And there's a lot of fairness in that. And then the brilliant minds who created the legislation went a step further and said, okay, and we've got to implement a measure here that really protects the lowest income earners, in a way where they aren't really hurt by this, where it's not regressive for them. And so the prebate was devised, and that assures that no one, regardless of income, but no one pays federal taxes on poverty level spending. And we've got a chart of numbers here to show you how that works. You're looking at the 2017 prebate schedule. So to give you an example, move your eyes to the right side of the screen. You've got a 2-adult household with 2 kids, so follow the green line. So the Department of Health and Human Services has set forth poverty guidelines. And you can see it at the bottom as published in the Federal Register. So in other words, inside of this department, they have done a whole bunch of research to determine, based on the size of your household, how much money you would spend that would equate to poverty level and below or above. And they've suggested, if you look at the green, that a family of 4 who spends $32,480 in the year is spending at the poverty level. All that money is going towards food, towards housing, clothing, medical supplies, transportation, and they're not really spending on much else. So when you go and spend 32 grand and change, and you multiply that times the 23%, over the course of a year, you will have paid $7,470 in federal sales tax. And you divide that by 12, and you get $623. The prebate legislation says at the beginning of each month, $623 will be direct deposited into your bank account for all qualifying households, valid Social Security number. And it doesn't matter how much money you make. You get this whether you're a multimillionaire or you're struggling to get by. So it was done to create fairness across the board to, let's say, de-tax poverty level spending. And, we just think that was a really brilliant piece of legislation that was woven into the FairTax. Okay, let's talk about prices. It'd be really easy to sit there and hear this for the first time and think, wow, okay, sounding good, and what's it going to do to prices? I imagine prices are going to go up by 23%. Yeah, that's not going to happen. So let's look at why. So first of all, understand that business income taxes and their cost to comply to the current tax code are passed off to the consumer. In other words, it's reflected in the price tag of everything we buy. We're really double taxed here. We're paying businesses costs and income taxes, plus our personal income taxes. So anyway, think about that. And so we call their business income taxes and the cost to comply the embedded tax that's in every sales tag, and it's approximately 22% of all the costs that goes into creating a good. So that varies across industry, but on average it's about 22% across all retail levels, or all retail sectors. And so what happens when the fair tax gets implemented is the embedded tax comes out. The 22% comes out. Why? Because we've gotten rid of personal and corporate income taxes, and there's no cost to comply to the tax code now. So you take the embedded tax of 22% out and the fair tax of 23% in. And there's some economic factors here that don't make it a wash, but it's estimated that prices on average will increase between 10 to 14% or so in the first year, and then market forces called competition, where companies vie for market share, are going to cut their prices to win market share, and that will drive prices down over several years. So yeah, you've got a relatively small impact on prices, and you've got the average American's take-home pay is going to increase by 29% because there's no more tax withholdings, because payroll taxes and income taxes go away. Think about that. Think about the average American who is maybe making, whatever, I don't know, let's throw out a number, $5,000 gross, and then they take home whatever, $3,800 or whatever their number is, depending on their withholdings. Well, now they take home $5,000. So that's quite a bit of money for most Americans. Yeah, really smart. So look, we have just undone the 7 major elements that put drag on our economy based on our current tax system. One by one, we've dismantled them through the fair tax. It's simple, it's fair, it's transparent. It will absolutely pour rocket fuel into our economy, like no question. So why wouldn't everybody want this thing? Because it threatens power. It threatens power, and it can be used as a leverage chip to argue against your opponent. It's used as a political pawn. Like, for example, if a candidate says they support the fair tax, the opposing candidate will deceitfully say, yeah, my opponent wants to raise taxes by 23%. Yeah, that's it. That's all they would say. So it could be used as a pawn. And then you've got lobbyists. So think about this. 50% of lobbyists are tax lobbyists, and they get paid very handsomely to influence Congress to manipulate the corporate income tax code that saves the wealthy corporations they represent a lot of money. Well, that's really great, except for the idea that if corporate income taxes go away, 50% of tax lobbyists, the 50% of lobbyists who call themselves tax lobbyists, they're not needed anymore. Do you think they are incentivized here? No, they're scared. They're threatened. So, it's really easy to say, hey, I wouldn't be a co-sponsor of that legislation if I were you, because it's not good for your image. And yeah, that re-election money, yeah, we're not doing that. So, man, it's really quite a thing to think about, isn't it? That a very, very small minority of people have a huge influence over, what's actually being represented here. So we got to make our voice heard through our vote, and vote for people who support the fair tax. So we're going to talk about why it's really important right now to do that, but before we do, we're going to pause and take about a 15-minute break to begin answering your questions, and there's some questions here that we're going to tackle. And then we will move into special topics. So, Larry, are you ready to go?
Absolutely.
Love it. All right. Let's see. I'm looking at some of these. Oh, so we have a question that comes in from IL. IL, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. If we could share some links to detailed info about the FairTax. Yeah, I think we actually have a slide on that, although we may have altered it, I'm not sure. But yes, for starters, fairtax.org, fairtax.org, and flfairtax.com, flfairtax.com. Brilliant, brilliant resources there. All right, let's see. So a question came in that says, wouldn't prices go up to cover the tax? So that came in early in the presentation. I did a whole slide to cover that. Is there anything, Larry, that you want to say more about how, beyond what I've shared already there?
Yeah, just a little bit. It was something that people trip on mentally quite frequently with the fair tax and regarding the sales tax versus the income tax. You have to remember, whenever you're looking at pricing under the fair tax, under a consumption tax, that because of the fair tax, all of the embedded taxes and tax compliance costs that used to be buried in the product that you were paying at the cash register have gone away. So the cost of the product through the supply chain goes down before the fair tax gets added on. And then, as Mark had pointed out, the price you see on the ticket on the shelf is the price including the fair tax. And Mark mentioned that it would go up 10 to 14 or 15%, and that's a guesstimate on our part. But we expect also that as time goes on, pricing will dip down a little bit to become more compatible to what we were used to previously. Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Larry. Yeah, and I should add that, and the question came in, so thank you, because I forgot to say it. The question was, yeah, how do you make sure that the tax isn't actually added to the price? Because you're going to see it on your receipt when you check out. It's like $100 pair of jeans, you get your receipt, $23 sales tax, federal sales tax, $77 cost of the good, and that's it. If you see anything else, it's like, wait a minute, you've got a clear accountability measure. Yeah, that's not supposed to be on there, right? So, your receipt's going to show it. So it's very transparent that way. Frank wrote in, so I use the example of gross pay versus net pay as with somebody making $5,000 and there's no more tax withholdings, and he, thank you for holding me accountable, Frank, said, there may be some withholdings that occur at the state or local level, and I live in Florida where there's no state income tax, so I don't see that. At any rate, thank you, Frank. The bottom line is there's no federal tax withholdings, whether it's payroll or income tax. All right, so the question is, are there taxes on services? Yes. Yes, there are. And if you think about it, every time a service is performed, it's essentially happening new for the first time in that instance. So, yeah, it's considered retail in that capacity. Larry, you want to expound on that at all?
No, just once again, don't forget that the embedded taxes are removed before the sales tax is added. So you're paying a tax now on services. It's just hidden. You don't see it. Under the fair tax, it will always be shown on your receipts. Mark?
Excellent. Larry, answer the question, what is the tax evasion risk under the fair tax?
It's a lot less than under an income tax, John. The reason is the income tax is enforced by the IRS, and they are, I heard just a little while ago, well, a couple days ago, that they are expecting this year for the 2016 tax year 153 million tax returns. Under the fair tax, the IRS is gone, it gets abolished, and the fair tax will be enforced and administered by each state. The states are much, much closer to what's going on in business, and they have better enforcement capabilities because the numbers are not as wieldy as they are under the national level. The thought that there would be a lot of tax monkeying around, if you will, under consumption tax, it takes two people to fool the tax system. And the majority of the business that is done, 85% of the business is done by 15% of the retailers. And those are the big box stores that we're all familiar with, the Walmarts, the Home Depots, Sears, and so on. And the chances of, if you think about it, the chances of them risking their license to do business for giving you a product without charging you the appropriate tax is very, very slim. A small mom and pop business, they might be able to get away with that, but the dollars that they contribute on the scale as a whole is insignificant. So for those few that would do something like that, they would probably give you a lower price, show their paperwork would show the lower price, and they will pay on your behalf 23 cents out of each dollar on the lower sales price that they've offered you the product at. So just to cover their butts in case the state Treasury Department wants to audit them, they'll pay that tax anyway. So they've done you a favor. That's the only way there will be any tax evasion under a consumption tax. Mark?
Yep. Thanks, Larry. Clear. So I also want to add, and I'm curious about this because I didn't hear it. John wrote a comment that says not only does the fair tax have several years of traction, 18, it also has a vice president who supports it. I didn't know that Pence actually supported the fair tax. Were you aware of that, Larry?
Yes, he was a co-sponsor when he was in the Senate or the Congress or the House, rather.
Yeah, got it.
That's
Great.
cool.
That is cool.
And as a sidebar to that, it would be a good thing for everybody that's on this webinar tonight to frequently send Mr. Pence a little memo, tweet him, put it on his Facebook, whatever, that we're counting on him to help get the fair tax raised so that at least there is an honest, objective discussion in the House on it. Mark?
Yep, great. Tracy wrote in, if the IRS is abolished, who collects the taxes and distributes the prebate? So the current, we mentioned in the presentation that the current state sales tax collection network that currently exists will be leveraged to form formally state sales tax bureaus, and they will be responsible for collecting it from the businesses in their states, and then they pass it on to the Department of the Treasury, and interestingly, the Social Security Administration would be responsible for distributing the prebate. All right. Wouldn't this be a great suggestion to make President Trump? Yes, thank you, John. Yeah, and I love Larry's thought, because if you've got a former co-sponsor as the vice president, you know, he can be leveraged to really have some influence. And you know, if there's anybody that's going to have the ear of the president, we hope it's the vice president. Larry, are you aware of any formal endeavor to connect with President Trump on the fair tax?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you folks are writing down, I hope you're making some notes on what Mark has been saying, but here's the tweet addresses for President Trump. It's going to be at Real Donald Trump, at POTUS, P-O-T-U-S, and for the Vice President, it'll be at VP Pence, P-E-N-C-E. And you can tweet them all day long, and hopefully you'll get a response. And if you decide to follow those tweet addresses, those Twitter addresses, you'll even see some of the tweets that are coming out from Donald that you'll get some of them before the news even broadcasts them. That's pretty cool. Mark?
Yeah, thanks. Terry asked the question, she says, charitable deductions will be going away. Has the impact on charities been studied? Great question. The answer is yes. And in the extensive research, what was concluded was that under the FairTax, charitable donations will dramatically increase. And the reason why is because, A, people, the vast majority of charitable contributions occur because people are passionate about a cause, not to get a tax deduction. A, and B, under the FairTax, they're going to have more disposable income than they've ever had before. So you take that coupled with their passion for a cause, and you've got yourself a really financially positive model for charities. So thank you for the question, Terry.
Now, that's a great question, Terry. And if you go to fairtax.org and on the menu bar, go to the research papers, you'll find that there are at least three documents that I can recall that address how the FairTax would affect charitable deductions and nonprofit organizations. Mark?
Yeah. So help me understand this question, Larry, and maybe you're hearing it in a way that I'm not. So this is from David, who writes, in Minnesota, there is no state sales tax on food or clothing. Wouldn't businesses strongly object to having more administrative work to engage in? Or would their software providers just provide better software? See, I'm not clear on that, because I look at the FairTax and I go, dude, you've got one form to fill out, whereas right now the complexity and the time and the labor involved in executing on your taxes is extraordinary. So I'm not quite sure how he's seeing it.
Well, I think the software is what's going to do the job in most cases. When it comes to the smaller mom and pop shop, and I use that generically, it's not said to be critical of the small mom and pop shops, but small businesses in general, the smaller businesses, where they may not have the cash reserve to pay to get their software upgraded like that. First, I think if they realize the actual savings in time, which is money, that they would get by having their software upgraded, they'll find a way to pay for it. But secondly, if they also consider that their software is also going to have to be adjusted to remove any withholding taxes that they've been taking out of themselves as the sole proprietor and of any employees that they may have, that goes away. And that all of the compliance work that they have for being able to file a tax return and then giving all of that information, their receipts and their bottom line numbers and everything for each category to an accountant to file a tax return, that compliance cost goes away, as well as the cost of the accountant for that function. So there's a lot of savings transitioning from an income tax, as we know it, to the FairTax. So by and large, I think they'll all go for getting the software upgraded, but for those that don't, it's a free country. They certainly have the choice to handle it as they want. Mark?
Yeah. Kevin asked the question, why hasn't the FairTax been brought to the floor of the Senate or the House?
Well, Mark mentioned earlier, those that oppose is primarily because of the loss of power. And he was very, very gentle in saying that the other reason is for the ability to exchange tax loopholes for other benefits. Typically, a congressman or a senator who gets behind a proposed bill from a lobbyist or a special interest organization who is lobbying them, Congress directly, they will, if they support whatever that effort is, they'll find themselves the benefactor of some nice re-election campaign contributions. They'll come from a PAC so that it's not coming directly from that lobbyist or that business, that special interest group, but it doesn't matter where it comes from. The result is the same. They're trading a tax support for a tax loophole for some cash and other perks that aren't too well talked about. Mark?
Yep. So here's an interesting question that I don't think we've gotten before, Larry, in 9 years. At least I don't think so. Would vending machines be compliant to track or audit the revenue generated from them?
I think today's machines would. They're all computer controlled now anyway, and they're certainly counting the amount of product that's dispensed and the amount of cash that's taken in. If they're in a state, they don't charge a sales tax and list it directly, but you pay the sales tax in whatever you're paying for that item. For example, you pay $1 for a can of soda. Well, within that dollar is the sales tax on whatever that product is. So you take 7% or 7 cents out of the dollar in the case of Florida here, or at least in Seminole County. And that would be the federal sales tax, or 23 cents in the case of the FairTax, 23 cents out of each dollar. So that is automatically going to come out. They could improve the software to be more explicit and to have it posted, but even vending machines don't put out receipts typically, so I'm not sure how that's going to be handled. It's not addressed specifically in the legislation, but when the legislation comes to the floor for discussion, it is certainly something that the House members and the Senate members can talk about, and if they think that it's important enough to have a receipt out of a vending machine, they'll put it into the legislation. Understand, however, that in doing that, they're adding to the cost of that product, so the customer is going to end up paying for that little benefit. Mark?
Yep. Yeah, great. We've got some questions. Stay with us. And we want to talk to you about our special topic here, which is why our time is now. And there's real urgency here to pass the FairTax. So this is really a simple explanation here. History has dictated that when major tax reform occurs, it's likely a decade or longer before any more major tax reform is moved through. And as those of you who've been in watching an election know, we have a current president who intends to do something pretty big, and it's not the FairTax. So if that happens, quite frankly, we will likely be on a 10-year hiatus, given the temperature of Congress historically. So we believe that the next 6 months are mission critical time to be all over the FairTax, all over Congress members, all over Mike Pence and President Trump to say, you've got to look at this thing. So with that said, AFFT, Americans for Fair Taxation, who is the organization that was privately founded, that put forth and funded and commissioned the research and the creation of the legislation, is the organization which Larry and I are a part of, and we need your support. So what that means is, if you are listening to this and saying to yourself, yes, this makes sense, this is better than what we have, this would be good for our country compared to what we have right now, This will benefit my children and grandchildren and all the generations to come. This will bring our politicians into a state of being held accountable. This will move our economy forward. This will create simplicity. If all of these things align for you, then we have a request of you to do something about it. And there's two things you could do about it. Number one is, well, let's say three things. You can donate your time. And you can go to FairTax.org and look at, find an icon that says grassroots or community, and find a local group in your area and go join and help them get the word out, and or start your own local group. The other thing you can do is you can open your mouth and you can be in action, and you can invite everyone you know to the fourth Thursday of next month's of next month to the webinar. And you can consistently, week in and week out, postcard and voicemail and fax and text your elected official and the chairperson of the House Ways and Means Committee. And the other way you could support is donate your money. And so we have a request that if tonight aligns for you, that you actually take action. And one of the ways you can do that is you can go to the website fairtax.org, and you can scroll over to the very right side of the screen and click on Donate and join what they have called their 1040 Club. And the 1040 Club are people who support the fair tax and put their credit card on automatic pilot for $10.40 a month. And our request is that if you're on the line tonight listening to this, that you actually, while you're on your computer now, like you go to fairtax.org right now and you go do this. Yeah, we're requesting 6 months of $10.40, and every new person counts for us. Like, it makes a difference. It gives us the money for ad campaigns, online and offline. It gives us money to pay some high-level legal and informed people that can lobby on our behalf and be in Washington and have a presence and actually be in the ears and in front of Congress members who can be influenced to be a co-sponsor. But it all takes money. So $10.40 will go a long way, and we're requesting that for 6 months, a 6-month commitment. Yeah. All right. So that's why we've got urgency, people. And you know what? Let's just go for it. And you donating is a way of going for it, and it helps. And don't stop there. Bring your friends and colleagues and coworkers and everyone you know to the fourth Thursday of every month. All right, let's get to the last of the questions, and then we'll wrap up for the night. And I really want to acknowledge the audience for being tuned in and asking a lot of great questions. You ready to go, Larry?
Sure enough, and you've got a raised hand on the board also, Mark. Greg.
Who is it?
Greg.
Greg, all right. Hey, Greg, we are going to take a risk here, and we're going to unmute you so you can ask your question or share a comment. And we request, given the time, that you be efficient with it so that we've got another dozen or more questions to get to as well. And we're really grateful that you raised your hand and you're participating. So, Greg, you have been unmuted, and if you'd like to speak, now's the time.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to whether or not groceries that you buy in a grocery store to feed your family and feed yourself, is that going to be taxed 23% under the fair tax, or will that just be neutral?
Yeah. Go ahead, Larry. You could tackle that.
Yeah, that will be taxed, Greg, but don't forget the embedded taxes that you're paying now go away first, and the compliance costs that the companies bear in order to file an income tax return, that goes away first, and then the fair tax is added. Plus, you get a prebate or a family consumption allowance, which is the technical term in the legislation. You get that family consumption allowance each month in advance, which will pay or reimburse you for the tax you're going to pay on your essentials, which are food, clothing, shelter, etc. And that's a good question.
Okay, thank you.
I'm glad you asked it because it clears it up for other people also. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Appreciate the question and appreciate the efficiency of it. All right, let's keep moving. Yeah, a couple people asking for the webinar slides. So yeah, absolutely. You'll get a follow-up email automatically from our GoToWebinar system. And thanking you for joining the webinar. And you can reply to that. And Larry and or I get a copy of that email, and yeah, we'll be happy to send you out the PowerPoint. Thank you for inquiring. Oh, great. Thank you, Frank. Frank wrote in, man, I got to get this slide back. Thank you. This is really helpful. There's a great website called popvox.com, popvox.com. And PopVox is a site created to inform the public of all legislation that is currently underway or that exists in Congress, and the public gets to vote. And with enough action, you know, politicians really respond to this. It's like a way of knowing what their constituents really are interested in and what side of the fence they're on any given issue based on the legislation. So you can search for HR 25 and S18. So write that down. HR 25 and S18 are the title or the names of the bills in the House and the Senate respectfully, and you can vote in favor of that, which are the fair tax legislation in both the House and the Senate. Thank you, Frank.
Okay, a little trick on that, Mark, and Frank, a little trick. If you put in HR 25, it may not come up. Eventually it will. They'll get it fixed, but you might have to try again with H.R.25. That I know works right now. That's it.
Yeah, great. All right, let's see. David makes a comment. One would think it would be pretty easy to see who is compliant based on who has grossly lower sales price, since the embedded taxes would not be paid. However, the mafia had historical strongholds in the East Coast vending world because it was easy to skim money off the top. Yeah, David owns a vending machine business, so he's looking at evasion or potential evasion through the lens of the vending machine world. So thank you for the comment, David. Let's see. Yeah, I think we've done it, Larry.
Okay.
Yeah, anything that you'd like to say before we make a final call for people to really step up and get involved?
How about a pre-call, final call? Listen, ladies and gentlemen, first, we do appreciate you coming on here because it shows that you have a sincere interest in learning more about the fair tax, or in some case, maybe even learning something about the fair tax. And that is important. Many people, your neighbors, your relatives, they don't understand the burden that the income tax system puts on all of us. But it comes down to whatever it does to business, we as a consumer end up paying for. And if we can get rid of that income tax system, we can then get rid of the corruption of Congress and the Senate, of Congress selling or trading, if you will, loopholes, favors for other benefits that they might pick up, other perks. So that's one thing. Secondly, we've got this window of opportunity. We know that there is going to be tax reform within the next 6, maybe 7 months, maybe 8. There are many people in the House and people outside of the Congress who are opposed to the fair tax for their own selfish reasons. And if you understand the fair tax versus the income tax, when I say this, you'll understand what it means. The only reason anyone is in opposition to the fair tax, which is a more economic system to administer and enforce than the income tax, and it is more transparent than the income tax, any income tax, is they're either don't have an understanding of the fair tax, a true understanding of the fair tax, or they have misinformation about the fair tax from other people who are opposed to it, for whatever their reasons are, or they're just outright on the corrupt side of life, and they are looking at it strictly for their own benefits. And if they're getting benefits out of an income tax that other people are not getting, and believe me, there are many people who are in that position getting benefits that you or I are not able to get, they're going to be opposed to the fair tax. So there's a lot of opposition out there. We have got to be able to talk not only to the opposition, but to the people on the street that we deal with who don't understand enough, who are not informed enough to understand that they're being lied to or misled, so that they're not so uninformed or misinformed. That's your challenge, ladies and gentlemen. And to spread the word about the fair tax, get more information on it for yourself so that you're more comfortable in discussing it. And do not be afraid to give us a call or an email if you are posed a question that you don't have the answer for. Give me a call, send me an email, send Mark an email, give him a call. He's not as available as I am, but both of us are more than happy to help you out there. And there are many other people in the Fair Tax Advocacy Organization that are the same way. We have got some of the sharpest minds I have ever witnessed in my life in the Fair Tax Organization here. And if you know the name Kerry Bowers, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know the name Kerry Bowers, but you're getting into any of the communication systems that we have, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, or one of the online messaging forums on the Yahoo groups, you'll get to know who Kerry is and understand what a sharp mind he is and how dedicated he is to getting the fair tax passed. So just give it everything you can. And like one thing Mark mentioned earlier, that's very, very important, or it should be to you. You may not see all the benefits that the fair tax is going to provide to this nation and to us as individuals. But if you've got children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, if you've got nephews or nieces, anybody in your sphere of influence that you love and you would like to do something truly good for, think of what you can do by getting rid of an income tax system and leaving them with the fair tax. Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Larry. Appreciate it. And I'll just take a moment to say, man, if any of you have ever been involved in an endeavor and truly appreciated who you were doing it with, you'll appreciate me when I acknowledge my dear friend and colleague and partner here, Larry Walters. This man is passionate, he's thoughtful, and this is a man who's committed. And I learn a lot from this man, and I just, Larry, love you and appreciate you. So thank you for who you are and what you do to move this endeavor along. And we thank you for being here. We look forward to seeing you in a month with all of your friends and family and colleagues. And we urge you to be a 1040 Club member. Like, just go do it. You don't need to do a cost-benefit analysis on it. It's a good idea. It's $10. It's going to make a massive difference in the lives of Millions of people. With that, everybody, have a great night, a great rest of your week, a safe weekend, and we'll see you next month. Bye for now.